Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Today is, I guess, relatively emotional day for me. Maneuvering through established cultural patterns. So, how would I explain this to you? Before you're born, there is a program of existence going on. This program gives you access through certain patterns of its being. That means not everybody can do everything, not everybody is welcomed everywhere, but in some sense there are patterns or positions of access. Now, when I say maneuvering through established cultural patterns, that sense of maneuvering I'm suggesting is not a maneuvering, how would I say it? It's not like physical maneuvering, it's a sort of maneuvering your consciousness through various modes of behavior that it exists through. And sometimes your behavior, it's inspired by the environment, so you are behaving for the environment, and sometimes the behavior is inspired out of your inner environment. And your inner environment can make conclusions beyond the current time. That means I could be talking to someone, but I could be so busy having to go somewhere where it's as if when they come to speak to me, there is an unknown bias due to the urgency of where I have to be. So you see, it's as if there are patterns here. Now, I've personally realized this. There is a likability factor in regards to engagement and communication. And what that means is that you can be, it's as if Nikola Tesla was a brilliant mind, but he worked alone. He worked alone because his questions went beyond the cultural framework of his time. He in some sense was onto something, pulling a certain string of his moment of his life that it's as if he had to follow through. The story of Nikola Tesla is that he's in the park like with his notebook and feeding pigeons or something, and then suddenly the vision of the AC motor comes to him. I don't think he had a notebook. He just goes and draws it on the dirt with a stick. So, especially as a kind of kid who, I guess, from the East, from Iran at the age of 7, I came to Canada, and I've been kind of exposed to the cultural program of both cultures and countries. And in some sense, I can tell you that it all has to do with preconceived notions of what the person has accepted. That's it. And when you enter an environment, the environment has a voice. There's no environment you have stepped in where its voice has not influenced you. There's a lot of people who try to smell roses, but they're right beside a dumpster. It's as if even if you attain the greatest rose, the location of the expression and authorization of your ability is limited. And so, especially in the way the economical structure is designed, you really don't have a choice. You gotta kind of like, there's a lot of pride and prejudice going around. Let me tell you what's on my mind. I currently attend Toronto Film School, and I pitched this film called Clone Kid, which I felt was an incredible film. And the response to it was of disregard. And to be honest, it's kind of like I'm starting to notice how much of the world centers around decisions of people who don't see all the data. There's a kind of ancient, like, no, it's not ancient, it's in Abrahamic religions where there's the suggestion that the end of days is in some sense the sky begins to crack down. And I believe the internal sky cracks down all the time. Every time your personality is dismissed or rejected, there comes a denial of that self. It's as if, how can I tell it? Like, imagine the lion, it doesn't just eat food other animals have killed. It has to kill the food and in some sense eat it. Right? It goes based on a level of certainty. Now, if the lion cannot kill his prey, his pride, that's the thing with pride. It's like you throw Thor's hammer in the sky, but then it comes coming down on you, you know? And so, of course, I'm not new to certain things being stopped in my life. It's as if in my youth, I have been, every person has a certain sensitivity with the life around them, and the intensity of it, in some sense, influences who they are. Everybody has a certain level of sensitivity to existence and to experience, and this goes even internally too. There's some people where their mind is not acquainted and used to many thoughts passing by throughout the day. Like throughout their day, maybe they pay attention to 3 to 4 major thoughts. You know, a lot of minor thoughts are going missed. But sometimes the speed of thought can increase, and when it increases, it begins to collide various senses of self together, and when that occurs, there comes emotion. If you notice, you never have an emotion on something until it's a drastic change. Unless something suddenly changes, you don't have an emotion. When we look at, for example, stand-up comedy, humor, we see it's a surprise. It's as if suddenly an image out of nowhere has appeared that does not relate to the previous image, and therefore, ha 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 ha. We all laugh when, for example, Charlie Chaplin can't get up the stairs in 10 minutes, you know. So in some sense, there is that, but there's also navigation. Like, this is the thing, if you wanted to move an object, you use your hands and you move the object. But if you wanted to move thoughts, you don't use your hands, you use your presence, how you are present, how the attention is being the moment. So pretty much you are born in a world filled with many programs. Many human beings you will see, they will have programs of their own, and there will be certain major programs which we all have in common. For example, the fact that we all have a biological existence is a common program. The fact that many people centralize their intelligence into an egoic construct is what we have in common, right? Pretty much what's happening is you're named as a child, and then you take the shape of an identity in accordance to how the world has been exposed to you and how you've been spoon-fed by the world around you data. And so based on the way you process data, you individualize. And so this abstract self goes on living in the world. Now the way the mainstream is that it's maintaining a grand illusion. You know, usually people protect the truth, very few people protect the illusion. But let me tell you why the illusion of the ego needs to remain. Because the ego is how we use language. Language is a technology that requires individualism. And if we move beyond our individualism, you'll suddenly notice this sort of strange silence coming over the species. You know, if everybody thought they were not an individual, then it's like we are not in a world of individuals anymore. So we have to maintain the illusion, but it doesn't mean we cannot make backup plans or efforts in other dimensions. For me in my life, usually when things have an objective importance, I localize my attention into a dimension. You see, your mind is very multidimensional. You're just not told it, or the framework for the acknowledgement of the mind is vague. Because in some sense, the poor souls before, like Carl Jung, many people don't understand the value of what he did. He brought forth ideas in a culture that restricted those ideas. You see, the supernatural is not something that should be considered real or imaginary. It is just data. Pretty much, it's as if you don't know who you are, what does it make? Why does it like? How would it help you if you find truth or not? You know. To be honest, the primary truth relevant to human beings is self-truth. Pretty much how your sense of self is keeping the world as a true reality. Now, I can tell you that the modern society, I was kind of let down. I thought the future generations would kind of make up for the blind spots of the past generations, but instead they are blaming the past generations and being even more cruel and violent. The reason is because any person who feels they have been denied or betrayed or life has hit you first, you will go on living your whole life and seeing people who deserve things and will not give it to them. It's as if a conflict with your mind will become a conflict with your world. You know? That's a sort of tragedy, we can say. Terence McKenna tells us, a culture evolves as fast as its language does. Ludwig Wittgenstein says the limits of my language are the limits of my world. Hafez, this ancient Persian Sufi mystic poet, he says, the words you speak become the house you live in. I am Mr.Within is noticing the human species' edge of conception is language. They should be teaching children language. They should understand the significance of their experience in this world. When the child doesn't understand it, it will first conclude a position of weakness, and then from a position of weakness, it will try to copy-paste the strength of others. Then we will have an artificial society before it becomes artificial, and that will be a tragedy. It's a tragedy any moment you do not live your life authentically. It's kind of like one of those butterfly effect tragedies, you know? The kid captured a butterfly in a bag at the same time. By doing so, an asteroid was hitting Earth, you know? Like, what I'm saying is, the value of our moment there is always new dimensions that can be added to the moment. You play around with it a little bit, and then eventually you'll get tired of language, and then you'll remain still, and kind of your consciousness goes to a sort of state where you're waiting. I call it it's kind of like the elevator of enlightenment. You're just in the elevator. You have aligned your intentions, you have pressed the buttons, and you're waiting. Now what happens is life can either increase in meaning or it can decrease in meaning. Anytime you're inactive or you detach from things, it decreases in meaning, okay? But it decreases in subjective meaning. Objective meaning really doesn't have a meaning. Like an object, it's like a tissue box on your table. You don't have good or bad feelings. That's not an evil tissue box or a good tissue box. Because it's inanimate, it doesn't take, it is not animated in our mind, in some sense. But for example, you see a human being and suddenly there is a sense that there is a living phenomena there. There is always bias from the unknown. As much as people are blessed and welcomed by the unknown, they are also rejected and denied from the unknown. Certain mystics and yogis, especially from the Indian tradition, they have made claims that the reason there is suffering is because the instantaneous is as if the person was a child, innocent, looking at the world, and it had accepted the world in a certain way. And then that world it had accepted began becoming jaded as the mind's reality differed from the actual reality of the moment. You see, this is where the psychological kind of sculpting of children occurs, when they, not per se what you teach them, but how their knowledge shifts from the unknown. It's their experiences. A child is learning from its experiences. But when we become adults, something different happens. We open up to the subjective realm in intellectual ways, and therefore a lot of reality becomes internalized. So believe it or not, a young child who hasn't learned language is the freest being on this planet. But as the child learns language, eventually its mind harbors imagery, right? So what I'm saying is, because you enter a world where it existed before you, there is a sort of programs and patterns. It's as if we have opened our eyes in a river called civilization, called humanity. And this river is moving with various forces. This is the advancement and the greatness of truly, when you read when you read history, you get access to viewpoints of other people who lived. And you see how the how some of the greatest people, how they thought. And how they thought was that instead of making themselves insignificant, they made the world so significant that their insignificance could change that significance. And so you open your eyes in pretty much a world of shapes, a world of forms. You know, this is why we say information. There is your moment, your consciousness is in a certain formation, therefore relating to things. You know, you can say that if an extraterrestrial landed on this plane and looked at a tree, and we were looking at a tree too, it's as if like that extraterrestrial may not have the word tree unless it tunes into the waves of our brains, you know, brain waves or whatever, and then it comes up with an impression. What I'm saying is the subjective realm can be planted anywhere. It's a seed you can plant in any object. So life, in some sense, you have to accept the program in order to change it. I think it was Edison. I don't know who said them. It's like, learn the rules so you can break them. You know, this doesn't mean you break rules all the time. It just means you look at your limits and move beyond them, considering what is accessible to you. For me, language and ideology and pretty much the scope of knowledge, it is a tool. It cannot be the person. You cannot be what you observe. Do you know what I mean by that? I mean, the observer is not the object of observance. Literally, if I go look at a tree, if I was inside the tree, I would not be able to see the tree. But because I'm observing it from an outer position, I get to see what it is. So similarly, it comes with the mind that there will come a moment where the person will have thoughts. These thoughts will be sudden, instantaneous, and very convincing. This doesn't mean we doubt. This doesn't mean we accept. It kind of means you are a natural being. You cannot have an unnatural solution. Therefore, no belief system can do you justice in a changing world. Therefore, our relationship with ideology and language should be different. When I read words in a book, those words do not relate to my life initially. They relate to images of my life I have access to. And of course, it will not be called life until there is love and loss. There will be things you will lose. There will be efforts you will make which will not be acknowledged. That is how the planet works. But there will be some efforts. And if there is one welcoming, like you will, whoever you are, whether good, evil, bad, nice, not nice, whoever you are, there will be a moment where you will stand in this world and it will welcome you. And if you reject the welcome, you have rejected your own mind. This is why many people in their lives, the excitement leaves them, the spirit of excitement. And it's tragic because they have not accepted life as themselves. Anytime you are cruel to someone, your mind is generating cruelty. It doesn't matter what you do. It's as if a person dies in front of you, trust me, you have died too. Your species has failed. The greatness of the efficiency that could have been continued has been discontinued due to personal reasons. And so, some have said society and culture, they're fucking machines. It's like a paper shredder. You go in there, it doesn't adjust to the person, it doesn't listen, it is just going its own plan. As if societies around the world, there are armies where the citizens ask to choose, okay, do I want to be a part of this or not? And so we miss out. We miss out on the global audience. And so the internet set us free. It set our minds free to get access to data that was not local to us. Pretty much we have non-local access to data. That's the wonder of the internet. The bridge between people's inner realities will be built, either by us or future generations. Because they will understand that there is a strange power to imagination, that it has the permission of the future to move. And sometimes I have imagined what would happen 700 years from now, 10,000 years from now, and it's not that I have seen nothing. It's just that you will see a lot of ideologies will die. Some ideologies will remain, and those ideologies that remain usually tend to be eternal are those that touch the unknown. You see, human beings can talk about things that are temporary or things that are eternal. But when we wonder about eternity, it doesn't come to us in a shape. Usually shapes tend to be temporary. So eternity for us comes as a quality, as an unknown quality of how phenomena is, due to the suggestion that there are other dimensions the intelligence is preserved and maintained in. They say energy cannot be created or destroyed. And what if this energy was conscious? It was, let's say, very poetically, conscious energy. You know? It's as if the format, the layout, the program will change, but not that which is, in some sense, the energizer of the program. There are many simulations the person lives in. Your memories are momentary simulations if you pay attention. And so for me, I have had long conversations with my attention. And some people will hear this and be like, Mr. Within, what do you mean you've had conversations with your attention? Your attention is not... And I'll tell you, I've had conversations that have dismantled my own philosophical conception. You see, everybody puts the world on an axis. The world is physically on an axis, and if that axis changes, there will be drastic effects into the weather and the atmosphere. But conceptually, everybody has a sort of principle, universal philosophy they set into motion. That means it's very funny. We feel we're people and we have to discover the laws of nature, but believe it or not, your mind becomes the laws of nature first, then becomes you. The child's mind is not attempting to be a person first, it is attempting to be a world. And as it is present as a subjective world upon the objective, we become truly established as mental creatures. The mind, René Descartes caught on to this. He called it the dualism of the mind and the body, as if the mind is in its own dimension and the body is in its own dimension. And so the mind, anything the body does has nothing to do with the mind, and anything the mind does doesn't have to do with the body in some sense. However, Hegel gave a response to René Descartes. René Descartes, his approach was a methodical doubt. This dude pretty much was like, I'm going to doubt everything until I find truth. And so he wondered what he could not doubt, and he could not doubt the questioner. He could not doubt the doubter. And so the doubter seemed to him as an isolated thinking subject, something that was invisible in his own reality as his moment, that the others could not see. Right now you hear my words, but the one saying them you cannot see. This is why there was honor and respect. This is why you respect your elders, because their minds are unfathomable to the younger generations. Sometimes you will enter gatherings where you will feel a stranger in your own home. Sometimes you will feel at home among strangers. Sometimes the soul gets torn apart by ideas. René Descartes thought he was an isolated thinking subject. Hegel looked at this and he said, "You're not even that. You're not even the questioner." Because the questioner's individuality depends on the collectivity of the outer world. And so what the idea there is that we dance in our minds as bodies convinced we see the external. The mind is such a powerful simulator that it's as if, to be honest, if you ask anyone, have you seen the external reality, they can't tell you if it's all been a generation of mind, or it has in some sense is the actual reality. So I have found that, I cannot speak as if someone who has trophies on the shelf. I can only speak as a person permitted by life to come this far. And the way I've understood that the future in some sense is going to maneuver is that the cultural patterns are going to have within them common denominators, and the common denominators are going to step out. And what that means is we're going to see there is an opportunity with a collective existence that was not possible with an individual existence. That's when you will truly live for your world. That's when your civilization will be something you will wake up for and you're like, how far has it advanced today? You know, you will care. You will care for the victory of all beings in this dimension, in this plane of existence. That is the task of the advanced communicator and the pilot of consciousness. You are sworn to a compassion that allows the moment to continue. And so call it forgiveness, call it surrender, call it devotion. It's life. And it's alive in ways that we cannot put in language. And that's where 2019 is. The human being's ideological self will die many times. My ideological self has been crucified publicly many times. Just in my childhood, in certain social circles, it has been crucified publicly because the tribe accepted certain ideas. And in those moments of crucifixion, I would always laugh. I think Christ's soul was laughing. Because you kill your mind. Anytime you dishonor the living world, a part of you dies inside. This is in regards to first finding an honest world to live in. It's so easy to live in a dishonest world. It is so easy to give the steering wheel to your imagination and be fixed in certain beliefs, not caring about what else there could be. This is why Socrates, I found him as a wise person. He says the only true wisdom is to know you know nothing. This man knew a lot, but why does he say the only wisdom is to know you know nothing? Because the voice of the unknown is louder than the voice of the known. Regardless of the unknown bias, knowledge has an existence, has a manifestation. Regardless if you deserve or don't deserve, the moment has awoken. In some sense, you have woken up in the morning and there's a day to live. Driven by fear and desire, you will only find emptiness. Driven by a care for what is alive, I feel that is the only way to step out of karma. You have to live for the world that you are planting trees in which you will not be sitting under their shade. In one moment, the world turns. In one moment, man's life comes into fruition. The evolution of our intelligence is going from a dualistic, individualized kind of consciousness to a sort of collective unconscious. What this means is some people are going to tap into it through nature. Me personally, our civilization hasn't become so technological that people's brains are being connected to the same computer. But I have found the same sort of result in regards to nature, that in nature there is a sort of rhythm, there is a sort of flow, there is a sort of elegance that in some sense it is as if you are not lost, but you're found in every moment of your breath. Life is not bound and caged in time. It is caged in moments where your free will exerts itself or not. And so you maneuver through any sort of program through a clarity and through, in some sense, keeping the flame of self-awareness alive. Human consciousness is like a candle. It's been lit. The wax melts after, let's say, 100 years or whatever, right? So, in some sense, sometimes you got to let go of the worlds you never belonged in, and sometimes you have to fight for the worlds that are your home. You know, your heart knows what your mind cannot. Your moment is being what your thoughts and body cannot. Your moment is the whole thing. For me, it's as if I'm not telling people there's a transmigrating Casper kind of soul, kind of, you know, jumping from things to things to things. That's, for me, that is still a mind game. But what is here truly must be something that instantaneously can be witnessed. If you believe in something is true, it should instantly be real. You see? Let me tell you why. Because you're there. There is no distance between you, the possibility of the idea and you. And so Maulana Rumi says, this poet, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there is a place. I will meet you there. And when the soul sits on that grass, the world, it's too full to talk about. Honor your moment and live on. You can't live off. You have to live on. You have to exert your will. It is the last rebellion, raging rebellion against the cruelties of a suffering world. This is why, in some sense, the gods cried when children, when certain characters in, you know, not just in mythology, but like they rebelled against their ancestors. The gods cried not because it was wrong. They cried because of the sacrifice, the inner sacrifice, in order to let novelty breathe, in order to let the future generations to be alive. We have to die in the inefficient ways we're living. Rise, mankind, rise. Rise.